developer advocate. That's kind of the career that has been common among many engineers here, and it's different among every company. So some of those fall under the marketing team. Fortunately, here it falls on under the engineering team at MongoDB. And when I say fortunately, I say that because that means I get to code a little bit more. I get to interface with the engineering teams a lot more than if I would if we were placed under the marketing team. And our focus is not just on giving talks and giving workshops and streaming on Twitch about programming and live coding. It's more about talking to developers at any one of these places that we may go to when we end up going to places again, and really seeing how we can make the product better, whether that's something that's confusing in our documentation, or there's something that they need to do and they can't find the proper documentation for what they want to do. We try to gather all of that information back and then either try to create that content ourselves or work with our documentation team, our engineering team, and try to fill that gap. So I'm super excited. I really like teaching, and we'll get to all the other stuff that I have later on because you're here about MongoDB, not me. So we will get started here. Let me share my screen. And I think we are sharing. Whoops. And everyone can see my presentation, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome. All right, so welcome. You are in the right place if you are looking for a beginner's guide to MongoDB. So we will start with, well, you may have asked yourself or have heard while you're researching or maybe talking to somebody, what the heck is a NoSQL database? And I say everyone at some point has said that because I myself have said that. I actually come from a relational database background. And if you don't know what that is, we will get to that in a moment. But that's kind of what I was taught in school. And it's certainly more common for a lot of developers who are starting out learning how to code, either in boot camps or in schools or even being self-taught, that's the way to store data. So if you're asking yourself, what the heck is a NoSQL database, you are not alone. And this is kind of how I felt, right? Like, maybe I think I know what it means, maybe not, I don't know. Well, I'm here to clarify that. So a NoSQL database, the no, there's kind of like a debate here. It doesn't really matter, but some people like to say that it stands for non-SQL or non-structured query language. And then some other people like to say not only SQL. So I like to say SQL as the shortcut for structured query language, which is the language you use to manipulate and query data in the other way of storing data. So NoSQL or non-SQL, or whenever you see NoSQL, that's kind of what they mean. And it's pretty much an alternative to the regular or more common way of storing data. So I've said that before, that it is a different way of storing data, and we'll get to that in a moment because there are several different versions of the way you store that data. But to go back even further, or one step back, a database is any place that you would store your data. So think about everything that we use in our daily lives. If we're on Instagram, or we're on Twitter, or we're on Google, or anything that we're using, that's a lot of data that needs to be held somewhere. Somewhere we need to keep track of all of those dates, of all the information on our calendar. Someone needs to store and keep track of all the photos that are posted on Instagram. I think I read at one point it was like almost 65,000. That may be an outdated number, but there's almost 65,000 photos being uploaded every second. So imagine that, plus all the hashtags, all the captions, who is posting it. All of this kind of data needs to live somewhere for an application to be able to use it. They need to be able to go back to this place where this data is stored and then pull it from wherever it's stored, which is the database, and then use it in their application however it is. So again, Instagram's the easiest example because I was just on it earlier. So in the morning when you refresh your feed, or the first thing when you look at it before you start your day, when Instagram loads your feed, it has to take into account, aside from their algorithms, which is the way they choose which kinds of photos to show you, they look at several things, right? What are the latest posts that have just been posted? Who are the people that you're following? And are there any that you interact with more? Because if so, based on whatever rules they have set, maybe they're going to show that onto your feed, or maybe you have specific settings that you've set. So it picks and chooses which photos and what to show you. And again, oh, I don't know why that button just kind of started. That was weird. Sorry, I just saw that writing and got kind of scared there. But yeah, so it's a different way of storing data, and the databases that we use power pretty much every application that you can think of, because all this data that we have needs to be stored somewhere available for the application to use at some point. NoSQL databases were fairly recent, so right now they're very, very popular, but they were not always popular. And this goes back to why I keep mentioning SQL, or structured query language. So this is the one that I learned back in college, where they showed this with the Microsoft products. So if you've heard of SQL Server or SQL Management Studio, or even just SQL, that's kind of where it came from. You maybe even heard of T-SQL, which is a different form of the language or variation of the language. But back then, we would store all of this data on all of the storage racks that companies would own, or data centers would own. And before, it was really, really expensive to have that amount of storage available to you. So as the storage costs went down and it became much more manageable, much easier, and much more affordable for all of these storage costs, that's when NoSQL databases started to become really, really popular, because you will see later on that that is one of the things about NoSQL databases, is that because of the way they store their data, that does tend to use up a lot more space. And before storage costs were really, really low, it was not feasible to use NoSQL databases because storage was so expensive. And lastly, there are NoSQL databases. So that's kind of like the generic term for how you store that data. But there are 4 variations of the NoSQL database type, and we'll talk about that now. So the first one is something called a key value database, and that is a type of NoSQL database. So key value databases are, I would say, the simplest or the easiest to understand in my head, at least. And it's in the name, it's key value. So they're like key value pairs. And if you've ever heard of Redis or DynamoDB, if you've heard of those technologies before, those are exactly key value pairs. So what happens is data is stored exactly as it sounds. You have a key, let's say maybe it's a name, right? And then the value is Adrienne. So if you were getting a list of people and then you had to find somebody based on that value, or based on the key of name, then you would be searching that name key and then pull the value of whoever is matching that. Now, name is something some people use or some companies use, but that's, as you can probably imagine, not the best way to kind of look for people, because some people might have the same names, right? Some people might even have the same first and last names if they have very common names. So this is better suited by adding a key that's something that you can kind of guarantee is going to be unique. So key value databases are a form of a NoSQL database. So that's pretty much what you have to understand about them, is that there is some sort of key that is used, and you use that to find the data that you're looking for. And then based on that key, there's some kind of matching value that's attached to that key. So the next kind of NoSQL database is something called a wide column store. So this is something that was kind of difficult for me to understand, because in the SQL world, SQL is very close to how you may have worked with data in a spreadsheet before, right? You have columns that dictate different types of data, and then each row is an item or a data item that has possibly all of those columns filled out that may have that information. So it's a very logical way to think of information. Now, wide column stores kind of reverse that a little bit. And instead of having all your columns across, you would have the actual rows as the individual columns across. It's kind of confusing. So the way I like to think about this is that it's like a two-dimensional key value database. So what you really need to know, because this one is not as used, as, at least for us, it's obviously not used, and in a lot of applications, I think it's a very specific use case. But these are mostly used when you need to store really large amounts of data, and you can't really predict how you're going to query or search or look up that data. If you don't know what kinds of patterns you may have, then this is a great way to store your data. So wide column stores are, because of that reason, they're very, very popular for storing information that comes from the Internet of Things. So like if you have a Fitbit, or even if you have information on your phone, if you're using like a Raspberry Pi or something to monitor, like a very popular project is to use a Raspberry Pi and configure it to monitor maybe the moisture levels in the air, how dry is the soil in your plants, how much sunlight is coming through, all of these kind of auto grow gardens. People use a Raspberry Pi to collect all of this information, and then they do something with it. So, it either all comes back into a wide column store, which is then used in an application that maybe draws some fancy charts that says, hey, the soil moisture is actually pretty low today. And then maybe it gives them an alert that says you should water your plants right now. Or it's going to rain in the next 2 days. Don't worry about watering it. So those are the kinds of use cases that it would use this information and then use it in an application. So wide column stores, for all intents and purposes, it's just good to know that it is a type of NoSQL database. The next type of database, NoSQL database, in fact, is something called a graph database. So this is something that's, again, a little bit easier to understand for me as well, because there are actual applications that I have used myself that use this kind of database. So when you think of graph and you look at the icon that I've chosen, it's very representative of what that kind of relationship between the data means. So the number one example, and kind of the one that started it all, is Facebook, right? You have a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, or you have someone who is interested in the same movie as you. Maybe you both liked that same page, and now Facebook has that data, among a lot of data, in fact, but it has that data, so it can tell you, hey, your friend actually also likes this movie, or it shows you other suggestions for other related things that may have some kind of relationship to you, whether that's you liked the same things, you live in the same place, you went to the same school or place of work. So graph databases, really like how they look like, are very much interwoven relationships, and they're very many relationships. They expand and they grow almost like a spider web because of all the different points that can be connected in between them. So graph databases, the way they store their data is in something called nodes and edges. So if you look at these little portions here, these can be considered all nodes. And for example, let's say this node is storing everything about people. This node is storing everything about places. And then maybe this one stores everything about restaurants or favorite books or something. All of these nodes can represent maybe a particular category of information. And then here in the middle is something that connects them all, something that says, for whatever reason, maybe this node in the center is actually a single person that you are looking up right now to say, hey, based on the person I'm looking up, what are all their different interests? So in the people category, it could be these are all of their friends and coworkers and people they might know. These are all of the places they've visited, if they've checked in to these places, or places that are on their wish list. And these are all of the books that they've read, maybe because they have integrated with the bookstore or Amazon and says, oh, I know that they like these books because I can see in the purchase history that they've purchased this book. So all of that related information is used in a lot of different things that we use today. If you go shopping online and you see, oh, you might be interested in this based on your last purchase, that's using a graph database, because somewhere at some point it's stored the fact that you purchased this, or you obviously liked it or needed it somehow because you bought it. So based on buying this product and based on what everybody else's history and preferences are that have also purchased that product, maybe you're interested in this one. And that's why sometimes you get really odd suggestions. Like I think, what was the one that I had? I think at one point I had to buy some ballet slippers in for a college class. So I'm by no means a dancer. I wish I was, but I had to buy ballet slippers for a class once, and so I couldn't find them anywhere in store, so I had to buy them online. So I purchased that, and I didn't use it for a while. And then for the next time I had to use Amazon, I needed to buy, I don't remember, it was something completely unrelated. I think it was like some kind of math book or something. I don't know. And so because I purchased these two things, seemingly unrelated things, like some ballet slippers because I needed it for one class, and then a math book because I needed it that next semester or whatever, the next suggestion it gave me was like a car battery. I'm like, okay, so someone somewhere out there, someone bought ballet slippers of this particular math book, and then I guess enough people also purchased a car battery. Like, okay. So they work in really funny ways sometimes like that, because they're not always perfect. So just because it stores all of those relationships doesn't necessarily mean that they make sense to us, but it makes sense to the way the application uses the data. And a couple examples of graph databases are Neo4j and Janus Graph, or Janus Graph. I like to say Janus Graph, but so those are the graph databases. And then finally, there's something called the document database. So this one is the most general purpose and most common type of NoSQL database. So the way document databases store data is in documents. So documents are similar to JSON objects. And JSON, that stands for JavaScript Object Notation Objects. And we'll get to that in a second of what that looks like. But you'll see here, the reason the icon shows these curly braces is most JSON objects start with a curly brace, have some information inside, almost like key value pairs, and then they end with a curly brace. So everything in between these two braces are part of that document, right? If this is the start of the document, and then we have a bunch of information in here, and then this is the ending brace, or the closing brace as we like to call it, that constitutes one document of information. Now, all the information inside of here, they can be a variety of different things. They can be strings, so like text, what we think of as text. They can be numbers. They can be Booleans, which are true or false values. They can be arrays, which are like a group of things that can be a group of strings or a group of texts, a group of numbers, a group of even more objects, or objects themselves. So within this document, we can have what we call subdocuments. So maybe another opening brace, some more related information, and then another closing brace. And so with this kind of way of storing data, this makes it really, really easy to scale the data, or if you needed to grow, and a lot of people are now needing to access that data because of the way that it's stored, it's easy to use the now cheaper storage that we have and scale it out, make multiple machines help out with all of the queries and all of the requests that are being asked of it. So if you have like a million people asking for example, there's an application online called Swappy, and it talks about different information from the Star Wars movies. So what they do is they offer something called an endpoint, which is a URL or a page that someone can request, and it gives you back some information. So like, let's say you have a million people asking for all of the people that was in the third film of Star Wars. You'd be surprised. They actually have a lot of heavy traffic that can get that high. But with so many people asking for that, if we only had a single machine basically serving those requests, or it's like a million people asking you, hey, who are all the people in the third movie? And if you're one person, well, they're going to have to wait, right? You can only get to so many people as fast as you can. But if you have a friend, if you have some family members, if you have more people helping you, if you have extra machines to help provide those answers for you, well, then that becomes a little bit faster, because now you have some other people who can help maybe that side of the room and get these people and tell those people, and you have your other family members helping those other people. You divide the work, which makes it faster, and it makes it much easier for you as well, because then you don't take a million people for yourself. You divide it among fairly or evenly among all the available people that you have to answer that question. So in the same way, because of the way that document databases store data, it makes it very easy to do that kind of spread out of the work. We call this horizontal scale, and we'll get to that in a moment. And MongoDB is a document type of database. So you might be thinking, okay, well, this is a NoSQL database or a non-SQL or not only SQL database. And if you're like me, I came from a SQL background, which is a different way of storing data. You might be thinking, well, what are the benefits and what are the cons of using it? Because this is not the best kind of database. There's no such thing. It really depends on what your application is doing and more importantly, what kind of data you're storing and how you're storing it, how the data is structured. So we'll go over a couple of the pros and cons of why you would want to use a NoSQL database. So number one, probably the most cited reason that NoSQL databases are popular and great to work with is because it has a flexible data model. So what this means is that you can change something called a schema, which is kind of like a set of rules that say what your data is supposed to look like. You can change what that looks like, and that makes it much easier if you're making constant changes in your application. So what is an example? Let's say, again, Instagram comes to mind because they have a lot of changes, but let's say when they first launched, they are storing very minimal amount of data. Maybe they store your name, maybe they store your location, and maybe they store the number of posts that you have. Obviously, this is just an example. They may have stored more, but let's just say for now that they have those three things. And let's say the type of data that the name is a string because it's text, right? So Adrienne would be the name. And then the place that you're in would also be a string. So it would be Las Vegas for me. And then number of posts would be, I don't know, like I wasn't on Instagram when it first started, so it's 0 for now, right? And let's say that as they started to grow and as more people got on there, they're like, oh, well, we actually need to store way more data about these people. We need to store the number of followers they have, maybe the location that they stored. Remember before we stored it as a string, so like regular text characters that we see and read, we stored that as Las Vegas, but now this time they want to store it as actual coordinates. So you're completely changing the type of data for that particular field, the place. So in a SQL database, this is something that is very, very difficult to do because SQL databases require that your schema, they require that these set of rules stay the same. And in order for you to make this kind of change, well, you have to change the entire table that you are working with. So if we go back to my first example, where we stored my name, my place as a string, and then the number of posts that I have. And let's say we created that in a SQL table. Well, all of these constraints saying that name is a string, place is a string, number of posts is a number, the SQL database is going to say this is the way the data needs to come. So there are pros and cons to that too, right? So if you need to make sure and validate some data comes in exactly that way, then that's a great way to help enforce that. But you can do that also in a different way in NoSQL databases. The trouble comes now when we want to make those changes. So if we needed to change the place field to store coordinates, well, in a NoSQL database, you just do that. You don't have to do anything else. That's the point of a flexible schema. You can store it and you can do it right away, and you can continue on with the development of your application. In a SQL database, you have to either write something called a migration script, which means you're saying, okay, I know this was the old set of rules. We're now going to move to these new set of rules, and we have to make sure everything is aligned with this new change that we're making. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of developers really, really like NoSQL databases, is because of that flexible data model. The next thing, something I was alluding to earlier, is something called horizontal scaling. So in the example I gave earlier, when everyone was asking you which people are in the third movie of Star Wars, that's much easier when you have some friends and family who are able to help you. In the same way, SQL databases, when you have a lot of requests coming in, a lot of people trying to access that same data, then you can get that help by scaling horizontally, by having multiple databases be able to serve those people. So you can almost one-to-one think of the people that I said in my example as extra databases that are now answering these questions to all of these people. And again, because storage has become much cheaper, not just storage, but also other resources like servers and availability in a lot of regions in the world, you can use all of that to your advantage to help you scale. So, for example, if I created an application and for now I only had one area that I was covering, which is West US, right? And now I'm talking to CodeUp and a lot of you who are in Spain. So obviously, if I wanted to serve you in the best way possible, I would want to open maybe another area there, have a replica set, have some other databases that are closer to you there, so that anytime you would request some information from me, it would be much faster. Instead of going all the way to Las Vegas, instead of going to the Las Vegas databases and waiting for all of that latency latency waiting for the request to go all the way back to Spain, you can go ask a database in Spain. So this is part of why NoSQL databases, they're kind of built on this structure by default of horizontal scaling. The next thing is fast queries. So this is kind of debated, right? It depends on what kind of data you're querying. It depends on how your data is stored. Just because you're using a NoSQL database, if you're using it improperly, then you're going to have slow queries or slow searches for your data. And it's the same with regular SQL databases. But what this means, why it's a pro, assuming the fact that data is stored in the right ways and properly. Um, the top example is, let's say for users, right? And you go into an application. As a user, when you look in your application, and let's say you look in your settings, there's a subset of data that you think of as being related. So if I were to change my user profile and I have my address there, I have some account information, I have my name, I have my phone number, all of these things to me are related, right? When I need them at the same time. And when I store them in a NoSQL database, well, all of that information, everything that is required or used at the same time, should be stored in a document, a single document, one place where I know I can get all of Adrienne's information. So, because it is in one place, the next time I need to ask for that information, I say, oh, I need all of this information, and I get it back quickly because it's all right here on this one place. Now, if you converse that with SQL likes to do something called normalization, which is a way of spreading out the data in that kind of architecture. And what this leads to is, let's say the information I have, address, phone, name, account information. In SQL databases, we kind of spread that information out among several different tables, especially if you normalize it. And what this means is my name could be in a user table, my address can be in a different table, my phone number can be in another table, even address sometimes, each of the different parts of it might even be split further out into different tables. So like street address is just in one table, and then city and state and country and postal code, those might all be in even all of those different pieces, even though they're all used together, might be stored in different tables, especially if they're highly normalized. So this is what we mean when we say in these cases, NoSQL queries can be faster, because if we were to get that same information, all of my information, instead of going to one document, like how we stored it in a NoSQL databases, this SQL database, if it's highly normalized and if they have stored it that way, will have to do something called a join, right? It will say, oh, go to the user table and find this person called Adrienne. Now join this address table and join it on some key that uniquely identifies and says, I am the owner of this address, or I am the one that lives at this address. And then if we have other tables that are split out, well, you have to make multiple joins. You have to make multiple joins. And you would consequently have a longer running query, because all of those joins, you're basically going to one table, okay, looking up, getting another table, getting that data, and then going to another table, getting that data. So by the way that it's structured, it can cause longer query times because of the joins that you have to do if data is stored in that way. And lastly, it's easy for developers. So if you've seen a lot of the like tutorials online, a lot of great tutorials on like Dev2, even our own university courses, Free Code Camp, a lot of these instructors who create awesome free content, right? You'll hear something called like the mean stack or the MERN stack or the MERV stack. And it's like a set of technologies that are meant to work together to help you build an application. And as part of all of that, the M in all of those is standing for MongoDB in this case. But you could replace that with any database. But when I say easy for developers, there's a reason that it got its own standing in a tech acronym, is because it is very easy for developers to kind of get started and get working with it. One of the reasons that is because of the flexible data model. But you do have to be careful of that. Just because it is a flexible data model doesn't mean you just do whatever. But the fact that it is flexible means it makes it easier for you to get started, get up and running, and just have something to store your data as you start building your application. And because you can change it a little faster, if you do run into some bugs, it's much easier to change, like again, the flexible schema. If you find something is wrong, you can quickly change it without much interruption in your development time versus say a SQL database. If you find something is wrong, well, that can be even more intimidating because now you have to completely migrate and change your schema on the SQL side, and it will take you much longer. So those are all of the reasons why you would want to use a NoSQL database, but there are cons too. So like I said, this is not the best database. It's not the database to use for every single type of application. It depends. But now we'll talk about the specific cons or disadvantages. So again, I've mentioned before that because of the way that it stores data, no matter what kind you use, a document, a database like MongoDB, a graph database, or key value store, these all usually require larger storage needs. Because you can store more data, let's say in a document, you may have documents that grow really large. Or if you add information that is accessed together, that document can grow very quickly. So as you start to add more of this data, and especially because it's flexible, maybe some documents have more data, some documents have less data, those storage needs can grow really fast. And that's something to be aware of. The next thing is it may need multiple databases. So when we were talking about the horizontal scale, that's kind of the whole point. But sometimes if you do need multiple databases for if you do need multiple databases, even for just a single application that you're using, and you're not using it for the reasons of having failover. So that means, let's say you have one database and this is the main one your application is using to get its data. And let's say there's a power outage or a network outage or something causes this one to go down. Failover would mean you have a different one, like a backup that says, oh, this one's down. Let me try to get back up running. In the meantime, while this one is going back up, I will take over for now and be the one that the application uses in order to get that data. So, but if you're not using it in that way and you have many other databases that you need, it can be a little bit more costly. But this is not something unique to NoSQL databases. You can also have that with SQL databases. And lastly, this is probably the most talked about con. And this is something, so they did not, most NoSQL databases do not have support for something called ACID transactions. So you're like, what the heck is an ACID transaction? Well, ACID transaction, ACID stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. And in the context of databases, this refers to a set of properties that ensure that the data that we are saving to our database has a very stringent set of guarantees. Because, if there's an error in the code, if there's a power failure, if there's any kind of other thing that happens, if there's any other kind of thing that happens that could um, cause the saving of this data to be interrupted, you want to ensure that the data that you are working with is still there in the database and it's still doing what you expect it to do. So the number one example for this is, let's say you are transferring funds from one bank account to another. Now, let's say in the middle of this process, something happens. You have a power failure, or I don't know, something causes it. There's a glitch in the matrix or something. And what you as the person sending sending these funds, you are obviously want to be guaranteed that not only have your funds been taken out of your account, but that they actually arrive at the person that you want it to go to. You also want to make sure that the correct amount of money has been taken out of your account. And likewise, you want the same amount to be ending up in the person that's receiving it. And finally, you want to make sure that it is your funds that is being taken out and it is going to the right person. So there are all these kinds of guarantees that you want when you are dealing with the manipulation of data. And ACID, these properties are things that most NoSQL databases could not guarantee. You were either missing one or the other, and it was a long running critique of NoSQL databases and why it was not so heavily used, because for certain applications in certain industries, you need that. Like in the banking industry, you can't have um, uh, like $5 be missing from this transfer. Or if a power failure occurs and you see that actually twice the money got taken out from your account and sent to two different people, you can't have these kinds of mishaps. You need it to be very stringent and you need it to be correct. And so that's something that is a big critique of NoSQL databases. But one thing I will add is that in MongoDB, we actually have added support for these kinds of transactions. It was also something that was a long critique of MongoDB because we did not have this kind of support for a while, but we now do have it. So now you're going, all right, this is boring, Adrienne. I have all the textbook information. What is MongoDB? Tell me about what I want to know. Maybe even start working on some stuff. Well, MongoDB, like I said, is a document type of database. So they are more general purpose, which means they were built so that they can be used in different scenarios and in different industries. And they really focus on the easy development and the scale. So they are built by default with having something called a replica set. So having 3 databases to start, and it's also focused on the easy development. So when I was talking about the JSON format, the JavaScript notation objects, they use a similar format to store their data. It's something called BSON format. So I won't go too much into the weeds, but it's a leaner and more efficient way of storing the data in MongoDB, but it looks like JSON, which makes it easier for you as the developer to work with because you're used to, the open curly brace, some information, closing curly brace. And likewise, because it is so flexible and because it is a document database, it means you can have documents that have different fields. So again, this is something that's not at all allowed in other databases like a SQL database, because remember, the set of rules that define what your data looks like have to always be the same. And you cannot have rows that have different data either. That's something that you can do in MongoDB, but not say in any other kind of SQL database. So in MongoDB, there are different tiers for different needs. This is common among every technology. We're not the only one that does this, but there's something called a community version, which is one that you can download and host on your own computer. And that one is free. So that one is great if you want to play around with your applications on your own computer, kind of get up and running with it. And then there's also an enterprise version, which is most likely used by other companies when they have some extra features that you may not necessarily need as just a single developer here working on creating an application. You might not need those kinds of things. Things like having compliance with certain certified boards, because some other corporate companies might need that. And then obviously the local and cloud variation, right? So again, the community and enterprise both can be local. The community version is started out as the local version. And then we now have something called MongoDB Atlas, which is our cloud offering. So instead of hosting your database on your own computer, you're hosting it on somebody else's computer. You're just using the database in your application without having to deal with managing it on your own computer. And finally, it's distributed by nature. So again, with the horizontal scaling, with things like high availability, meaning no matter what happens, you have some sort of backup to make sure that your application's data is always available and always running, and also the geographic distribution. So again, if I needed to send data over to Spain or to London, where I think there's somebody here from London, wherever I am, there is a place that I can have that data available, and that makes it faster for you, whoever's ending up getting the data, to get it, and to also make sure it's available to everybody when they need it. So let's take a look at what this data might actually look like. So this is an example of a very, very simple document. This can be one document, and you'll see here that's the JSON notation, right? We'll have an opening brace and a closing brace to signify that this is all the information in one document. And in my document, I might have something like, again, my name, my social handle, my title, and then I might have something called groups field, which holds an array. So this array, if you remember, is a group of things. In this case, it's a group of strings. So these are the groups that I volunteer with. And these are stored as strings, as character text that you would read, right? But this could be something else. This could be, let's say, if I change this to number of cookies that I ate throughout the months, then I could have like numbers in here, right? I would be like 20, 21, 30. Those could all be in there too. But an array is just denoted by the brackets. Is just denoted by the brackets here, and then all the related information that's part of that field. And then finally, we have Borderlands Hours Played. That's, if you haven't noticed, one of my favorite games. And then this one is of a type of a number. So this is an example of a document. This is something that can be stored in our NoSQL database. And this is something that can change over time. Let's say I wanted to change my name to full name. I mean, the point here I'm trying to make is that you can make that change. Obviously, you don't want to just change willy-nilly because you can. You still want to be sure that the changes you are making are necessary and needed, but the fact is you can change it very easily. Let's say I needed to add a field. That one is way more common. So let's say now actually I'm playing the new game Fall Guys, and if I wanted to add that field here as part of my document, I'd be able to say, okay, Fall Guys hours played, and then put my hours played here and easily add that to the document because it's flexible. You can make these kinds of changes because you're allowed to. And then the database, the document database itself, and MongoDB allows for those kinds of changes because it is using the document model. So that is an example of what a document looks like. And so now we get to the point of, okay, well, I see how this works and what it is. So how do I actually use MongoDB in an application? And I will show you. Let me get this up here. Let me find it. And of course, I closed the tab. So we're going to switch over to a tab really quick. Let us find it. I apologize. I had it open. It must have closed. Let's see. Here we go. So I'm going to bring this here now. So we have something called drivers. Now, drivers are things that are written in specific programming languages that allow you to interact with MongoDB. And so you'll see here, we have several different drivers. These are not the only ones, but this is how you would actually integrate MongoDB into your application. So let's say this is the start of a JavaScript application. You'll see here, we do an import right here. And we are importing something called the Mongo client from MongoDB. So this is basically saying, hey, get me all of this code that allows me to work with my MongoDB database and add it to this application so that I can use the pre-built commands, the pre-built functions, and all the other portions that you need to interact with that database. And now this is just a sample, right? So here we're declaring the connection URL. So this right here it's like a connection string. So this says this is where my database, my MongoDB database is located. And we're going to store that right now to just this URL variable because I might need it later on in the rest of my application. And here we're showing a simple example in JavaScript of how you would connect there, right? So you have the set of instructions on how to work with MongoDB. You tell your application where it's located via this connection string. And this is another variable we're setting because the database is something you might need later on in the rest of your application. And then now you finally, here is something called a try catch block, which means you're going to, it's a function to try to do something. So whatever's in between these braces, you're going to write some code to do something. And in this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect to our MongoDB database. So here we're saying we want to use the built-in Mongo client.connect function. And we want to connect to our URL. We want to connect to this. And this is an asynchronous function. So that's why you see the await here. So that just means while we try to connect, it might take 5 seconds, it might take longer. No matter how long it takes, we want to wait for it and make sure that it has successfully connected. Only when it's successfully connected and only when I know I am, actually connected to my MongoDB database, do we then want to set that to our database variable, because we can be sure that it's connected and we're going to be able to use it later on in our application. And then here is just a console log that's kind of just for us that says a reassurance and a confirmation message, right? It says, yep, we're able to connect successfully. And if we don't, if we do have an error, that's why this says try. So if we are not able to connect successfully, whatever that error may be, we want to catch that error. And then this is kind of funny, but we want to handle that error, right? Whether that's sending a message to the user, to us, saying, oh, we were not able to successfully connect, please try again. If we have more information in our error, the better, right? We want to try to tell ourselves, if we're working with this as devs, right? We want to tell ourselves as much information as possible of what could possibly be the issue so that we can try to resolve it. And we may want to write some extra code to handle different kinds of issues. That makes the application much nicer to work with, and it makes it a better experience for the people who end up using your application. And then we finally return the actual database. So this is connecting to the database, right? So that's the first step. Before, if there's no connection, if we don't know where our data is and how we make that connection, we won't be able to use it. So that's usually something we would do first in their application. We'd connect. And then here is an example of how you would actually insert a document. So let's say your application here, what is this one? So this one is kind of like a rating system for restaurants, right? And one of the things that you can do as a user of this site is to maybe see the restaurant that you went at, give it a rating of if it was good or bad, and you want to save that information in our database. So how would we do that in a JavaScript application? Well, we could have a function that says insert documents. Why not? Because that's what we're doing. And in it, we're passing the actual database, right? So we connected in that first file. We now know we are connected to our database. So the first thing we'll do is, this is assuming we have a collection called restaurants in our database. So the first thing we want to do is get those lists of restaurants, get that list of restaurants and save it to our collection variable. Now we want to insert some documents. So we can use something in MongoDB. So this is an example of Mongo query language, or MQL. So you'll see SQL structured query language is SQL. Here for MongoDB, we have our own language, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And it deals with a lot of the things you would do in a database. So in this case, we're using the insert many command. And what we're doing here is, you'll see here, these are examples of JSON objects, right? They look similar. You see the opening brace, the closing brace, and then the information in between each of these. And each of these objects between the curly braces, this counts as one document, right? This is one and this is one. And because we're inserting multiple documents, we're using the insert many command. And because we're using the insert many command, we have to put the documents that we want to insert inside an array, because we're using more. If we only wanted to insert one document, we have a command for that, and it's called insert one. Except this time we wouldn't need the array. We would just pass a single object in, whatever it is that we were inserting. So in our application, we now have access to our collection, which is the restaurants. This is saying this is the ending collection that we want our data to be stored in. And then to actually insert this new data, insert these new documents, we just use the insert many command. And in this case, we're inserting information about Sun Bakery Trattoria, which I guess was rated 4 stars. And here you'll see the categories. Again, it's another array of what is available at this restaurant. And the same thing for this place here, which it's only 3 stars, but Blue Bagels Grill. So we're inserting 2 new documents into our restaurant collection about these 2 particular restaurants. Okay, so now we have this data stored in our MongoDB database. Now, what if another user is now searching and looking for the ratings of these restaurants? Well, part of your application now needs a way to query or find the data that you have stored. So this is called a query, right? It's asking the database, hey, give me back information that matches these conditions. So how would we do that in JavaScript? So same thing. We know we're going to get the restaurant's information. So again, we're storing it in our collection variable. And now we want to have a new variable called docs, which ultimately will be all of the documents or all of the restaurants that are stored in our restaurants collection. And we'll use something similar. So again, in the last one, we used collection.insertMany. In this case, we want to use the .find command in MQL. So pretty logical naming, but In this case, what we're passing here is an empty object. So usually when we are searching for documents in MongoDB, this first object here is used to match some kind of criteria. So because here we want to just get the list of all the restaurants, we don't need to match against any kind of criteria. It's fine. But if we did want to match and say, I only want to search for Italian restaurants, you would then add a condition in here, and we'll show you in a bit where you'll get to write your own MQL. You'll add that condition to find and basically filter out all of the other documents that do not have that Italian category in their document. And then, but here we're just finding all the restaurants, right? So we're not passing a condition. We're just saying, give me back everything in the restaurants collection. And then here is just JavaScript specific. So we get this, the data that we get back from this command is still in a JSON format. So we are just converting it into an array because that's usually easier to work with in the rest of our application. So we just convert that over. And then again, these are just some helpful statements for us as the devs, right? It's ensuring that we actually found those restaurant records. And then this is, we'll actually log the actual information, the actual documents found into our console log, which can be helpful if during development you're running into issues or something. You want to see what's actually being returned and if it's what you expect. So that's how you would create a query and like pull back the data that you have saved and use it. And then lastly, the number one thing here to know is to build an index. So an index is something that is not unique to MongoDB. It's part of most databases. And what this does is it helps, it's almost like a bookmark to say, this is the kind of data I know I will be accessing frequently. So if you know that you're accessing this data a lot, you can help speed up the process of searching for that data because you have that bookmark in the database. So if you know that the restaurants in the restaurants collection, people are searching by, let's say, the category field. So if you're searching for only Italian restaurants or only cafes or something, there's a particular field you know that everyone uses. You can add an index to that field to make it much faster because you're telling the database, hey, this person is most likely going to search for this. And when they do search for something via the category field, well, you've already predefined, you've already have a bookmark there. You can make it much faster to go look up that information because you know that that's where they were going to look for that information, or based on a filter on that field of category, you make it faster. Without an index, you're basically trying to search the entire database and say you're looking through all of the information, all of the fields, and you're trying to look for that match. But again, if you add an index to something, let's say category, you'll know to first look through category instead of the entire database. And then you'll say, oh, here it actually matches within a category. And you'll make your query faster because you know to go and look there first rather than just kind of all over the place looking for that matching data. So if you were to build an index, which is super important to make your applications fast, you can do that right here. So what are we doing in this JavaScript application? So we have another function that says index collection. And this is just an example of how you would do this in a JavaScript application. If you're using the cloud version of MongoDB, there's actually a portal where you can set all of this beforehand. So you don't have to do it in your application, but you can do it in your application if you need to. And you're using the same thing. So we need to know which collection we're going to be applying this index to. And in the end, we have the result of whatever we're indexing. So just like a lot of the other commands we have, they're pretty, the name is in itself. This time we're using the create index command. And what we pass into here is the actual field or fields that we want to add an index on. So in this case, here we're adding an index to the field name, and we're adding it by giving it a 1. This just, a 1 is like a Boolean value here. So it just means yes, we want to add an index to name. If we wanted to say no, which we wouldn't really do here, but if you wanted to denote no or false, you would do a 0. But in this case, we want to create an index, right? So we want to create an index on name. So we're passing the create index command, the field that we want, which is name, and we're explicitly saying, yes, we want to add the index to the name field. And again, this is an asynchronous function, so this could take 5 seconds. Indexes actually might take a lot longer because depending on how much data you have, when you run this has to go through every document and go through every name and say, okay, you're now part of the index, you're now part of the index, you're now part of the index. And if you have a lot, it can take a lot longer. So again, we do an await because we want to make sure that it has fully and processed creating the index on all of the documents in your collection. And then when it's done, you just return the result. So this is a great way to help speed up your application, and you want to try to build indexes on data that you know is accessed a lot, something that most people of your application would use or would ask for or search for. And finally, there's something called an aggregation. So this is a little bit more complex, but this is basically a very fancy way of querying and filtering and analyzing your data. So what this, let's go through the example here. So here we want to, again, use our restaurants collection. And let's say you want to analyze how some of these restaurants or places that are in this collection are doing. In this particular case, we're looking for any bakeries. So you'll see again, the first thing we're passing here is our matching criteria, right? It's our filter. And this right here, this dollar match, is a stage, something we call a stage in an aggregation. So what this does is, well, again, it's very self-explanatory, but it's a step in our aggregation that does something to our data. So in this case, it's not really doing anything. We're just matching. We're just saying, give me all, out of all the documents in our restaurants collection, only give me back the ones that match a bakery category. So from the start, we're already filtering out any of the other restaurants that don't match this. And now we have this subset of documents, this group of documents that so far are at least a bakery category. So then after that, the next stage, the next thing we do to that data is, again, we're using a different stage now here. This one's called group. And lo and behold, what happens here? We group the data by some sort of condition. So now that we have this subset of data that's just all bakery documents, we now group them by stars. So this is another field that is part of our documents. And we want to also group total the amount that is grouped by the star rating. So now it will take all of our data that is a bakery category, and it'll basically divide them up. And it says, oh, you're a 4-star bakery, you go here, and we count you as 1. Oh, you're a 3-star bakery, okay, you have 1. Oh, we have another 4-star bakery, so now we have 2 4-star bakeries. Oh, we have a 2-star bakery, that's 1. So it goes through all of the documents that have been matched as a bakery. It sees what their star rating is and then groups them by star rating, and then gives you back a count of the total number of bakeries that have that star rating. So it's a very common way to look at the data that you have. Maybe, upper management is like, oh, I need to see all of the different restaurants and what their star rating is. Or even when you yourself, your users search. I mean, I know I have used rating systems like that where I say, give me only all the bakeries that have 4 stars and up. This is one way to kind of filter that data so that you can have it in the way that you need it. So if you need to divide it by star count, if you need to divide it by category, this is one way to manipulate your data to what you need in your application. And that's like the quickest crash course on how you would use it. That's most of what you would use in your applications, and at least the commands that you would use with MongoDB. And these can get way more complicated based on the data you have, what kinds of analysis you want to do on your data. You know, sometimes maybe you have a stock trading account or a finance application, and they have, you know, fancy charts and other kinds of analysis that you have to do. These can get way more complex to help fill out those charts and to help you really deep dive into what you're looking at. And we just went through all of that in a JavaScript application. So if you don't use JavaScript, well, that's the great thing about this, is that we have different drivers, and you can use the language that you want. So if you use Python, it's everything that we just did, but with Python syntax. So it's the same thing. You have to connect to your database. In this case, we're using Python syntax, and we're using the Python version of the MongoDB client, which is the way we connect with MongoDB. And then same thing, we're doing all the same things. I really like this example here because you can see the same actions that we're doing in multiple languages. You know, we're connecting. This is how you insert a document. So you'll see it's slightly different in the Python driver. Here it was an underscore, because it's for each language, we try to also keep in line with the best practices of the language. So in JavaScript, you'll see that it's the camel case, right? But in Python, we use the underscore. And yeah, you can go through each language, and this is how you would use all of those different commands when you're working with MongoDB and your data in that language. This is in Java, right? This is the aggregation in Java. This is how you insert it. So they're mostly similar. They just depend on the language. And then the same C++. I actually have never used C++, but it looks very, I can see why a lot of people are like, oh, I'm so glad there are newer languages. They abstract away a lot of this stuff and make it easier for us as developers. And then C#. This is actually my background is C#. So let's go back here. So yeah, in C#, you know, we create a new Mongo client, new instance of it. We get our database, and then we get our collection. So these are just different ways, language-specific ways of writing how to get or how to interact with our database and how to insert documents, how to update them, how to aggregate them into different subsets of data that we need. And you can use them in many different languages. And again, these are not the only languages available. We have other languages too. So if you check the drivers page, which I can link in the chat later, you can most likely find the language that you would like to do. Okay, so we'll take a break. The next step is we're actually going to have you write some MQL, and I will help you every step of the way. But I know we went through a lot. That was a lot. So let's come back in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then I will walk you through going through writing some of your own MQL. So thank you for listening so far, and I will see you in 10 minutes.
Shall we say 7:25? Would that work? I mean, I know everybody's in different time zones, but 7 minutes, 8 minutes from now.
Sure.
Perfect.
All right, it's 25 past. So we are going to get started and just ask any questions if there's any part that you've missed. So if you have the tab up and running, that is great. You should see something like this. Mine is just a little bit zoomed in so that it's a little easier for everybody else to see. And so I'm going to apologize in advance because this site's kind of wonky. So it may run into issues. And if you do run into issues, just let me know in the chat. I will try to my best to work with everyone. The very common thing is if it kind of stays stagnant for a while, it's going to tell you, oh, you know, your database state has expired. What do you want to do? Just refresh the page. And make sure to click the 4.2 version here. So just have that one selected. It may take a while. Unfortunately, the other tool I wanted to use is being worked on right now. And we ourselves, funnily enough, we have a tool that is similar to this, but I do like the way that this shows not only the code that we're going to be writing, but it also shows you what's happening in the database. I think it makes it much easier to see what is happening and see the effects. Oh, see. So again, we're just refresh all the things if it does happen to. I don't know if it will even handle it because we have everybody going on it right now. Let's try. Interesting. All right, so that changed. Well, while that is going, let us also get something set up here. So while that is also possibly loading for you, I'm going to put another link in the chat. It's a gist to something. We'll deal with that later. Open up with this gist that I have here, and I guess I will show it here too so we can work on it together. So I have created kind of like a template for you to fill out, and this will be the data that we are working with. So I absolutely love desserts. I'm a sweet tooth, but not in the chocolate sense. I like anything sweet, like a honey toast or tiramisu or an affogato. Every now and then, I like those kinds of desserts, and so I've made a JSON file that you can copy. So once you make it to this gist that I have, which I pasted in the Zoom chat, go ahead and I wonder if, no, only I can do that. So go ahead and copy from the line 1, so the first opening brace. Go ahead and copy all the way down to line 34, so the other closing brace. You can press Control C to copy it, or you can right click and copy. And then open up any kind of editor. So you can use Notepad. If you have VS Code, you can use VS Code. Any kind of editor where you can paste this into and write and work with it yourself. So I have VS Code. And so when you paste it in here, it should be like this. And just to help us out here, I'm going to make sure this is a JSON file so you can see it easier. So, I'm going to give everyone a minute or two. Once you're ready, if you can use the reaction button, if you can see it, just give me a thumbs up if you are ready to go and are at this point. Or in the chat, just give me a yes or good to go so I know. Thanks, Samantha. Carolina, thank you, Vanessa. Give a couple more moments. So again, just to reiterate, we went to the link in my chat, which is that gist.github.com link, which will bring you here. And this is a template I have created so that you can copy all of this, and then open up your editor of choice. So I have VS Code. I pasted that in here. You can use Notepad too if you don't have the editor. You can paste it in Notepad like this. Just anywhere that you're able to write as well. Awesome. Thank you. Everyone's saying done. I'll give a couple more. Anyone having issues, you can privately message me if you are having issues. Or you can just let me know. Just unmute yourself really quick. We're all in this together. We want everybody to participate, so don't want anybody to get left behind. And it's no problem at all. Awesome. Looks like most people are done. We'll give one more minute. Anybody else that has any issues, please either privately chat, or say something. Okay, cool. So now we have this template that I have for you to use, and I want you to fill out your own favorite desserts. If you're not a desserts person, I apologize. Just if you were to be a desserts person, imagine what the best desserts would be for you. What we're doing right now is we're kind of creating our own data that we can work with in a bit. So I have an example of the first kind of dessert that I really, really like, and it's something called honey toast. So it's a Korean dessert. And actually, to further cement the looks here. Actually, and I'll even go further and find the one that I always get in here. So, image in tab. So there's a place here in Las Vegas. They're a dessert cafe, and it's called Is Sweet, and they make these things called honey toasts. So you're like, what is a honey toast, Adrienne? This is a honey toast. So it is literally a quarter block of sweet toast. And then you can choose whatever you want to put on it. I like to put ice cream, some fruits. You can put some honey, obviously, is on there, some whipped cream, whatever you want to put on there. It doesn't have to be this overloaded, but it's basically like an ice cream sundae, except you put it on top of sweet toast. So it's one of my favorite desserts. And so I've listed it here as one thing that I want to add. We're going to create a desserts collection in a bit, but I've added that here. So I've named my dessert, which is honey toast. Source is where I get it from. So I put is sweet as the source of this particular dessert. Total consumed, I'm going to say for the year, or this could be lifetime. Let's just say for the year, just assume. I can almost guarantee you I've probably eaten 52 at this point because they're really good and they're one of my favorite desserts. But add a number in there for how many you think you've eaten. And then for the ingredients list, I just like to think of these as the main categories that describe this dessert, right? So obviously honey, toast, and then I like to put sweetened condensed milk on this dessert. And what I'd like for you to do is you can leave this one here if you'd like, or you can change it up for your own dessert. But I'd love for all of you to fill out the remaining 4 objects here with your own desserts. Fill it out with the name. So make sure you have it in between the quotes here. Fill out where you would get it from. Even if it's homemade, just write homemade. the number that you have eaten of that particular dessert or how many you would like to eat. And then in the ingredients list, put maybe two or three, at least two different kinds of categories for what describes your dessert. And make sure you have them in quotes like this. So if you want, you can just copy this and paste it in here so that you're sure that you have the right quotes, and then just change it out here for, whatever describes your dessert. So I'll give everyone like 5 minutes to do that. Same thing. If you're done, put a done in the chat or give me a thumbs up on the Zoom. If you have any questions, please let me know. So yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes to fill this out with our favorite desserts. And I actually already have mine filled out. So if anyone wants to see as an example. And I'm here to help you out as best as I can. So if you're stuck at all or anything, just let me know. Good eye, Mathilde. So this is underlined in red because the way I have saved this file as a JSON file, it is seeing a sort of syntax error, which it only matters if we're continuing to use this in other files in this application. But for now, because we're going to end up copying and pasting this into that other link that I asked you to open to. So for now, this will be okay. Let's see. Oh, not peak definition. Alt F. So what it's thinking is that this is the entire JSON object when it's not. I have other documents here. So it's probably triggering one of my rules. Awesome. People that are done, you care to share one of your favorite desserts? You don't have to, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what everyone else's favorite desserts are, especially if there's something I've not tried before. That is good. I'm gonna Google that, Mathilde. Like this, is that right? Those are, I can't believe I forgot about these. That's a good choice. Ooh, crema a catalana. Oh my gosh, yes. These look like creme brulee. Are they different? This is my husband's favorite dessert, certainly. What is coulant? Oh my gosh, yes. This is like when they're warm, and then you have a little bit of vanilla ice cream to eat with this. Like this right here. Oh yeah. Nice. So they are like creme brulee. All right, now I'm excited. I want to see what all these desserts are. Cake. Ooh. What's in here? Are these look like almonds and some sort of cream? I would try it. This looks amazing. That's like a tort. Ooh, walnut. Ooh, lemon posset. Wonder if they'll have one like that. Oops. Copy. Does this look close to what you... I know yours is homemade, but if it looks like this or is the same general concept, this looks really good too. Looks nicer than yours, but I'll eat it too fast. Hey, looks are only there for like one Instagram photo, right? And then we just stuff our face. I know I stuff my face when it's my favorite dessert, so no shame. Sweet. So I will give maybe one more minute. If anyone else has any issues, if you're struggling to come up with another dessert, choose one of these lovely ones. Or you can just maybe copy and paste some of the, copy mine, use mine, change it a little bit, maybe make it, I don't know, chocolate honey toast. But yeah, if you have any questions at all or problems, let me know. Did you have a question, Zuha? Or did you just accidentally unmute? Oh, accident. No problem. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a question. No problem. All right, so now we should probably all have our favorite desserts. No problem, Zuha. So now we want to copy all of it, right? So you can do Control A to copy everything, copy the entire JSON file, basically, copy it. And now we're going to go, hopefully this is not going to give us problems. So when we get to our tab here, because we've been kind of sitting for a while, just go ahead and refresh it just for now, just to make sure that everything is okay. And what we're going to do is, I apologize that these can't move up. So let me try to move this up so you might see it better. Oh, it's going to be bad either way. So we're going to go into this lower section here where it says type your MongoDB commands. And before you paste it, we're going to do something called an insert many command. So what we're going to do is we would use this actual command to put some documents into our database. So to do that, you can go ahead and type along with me. So we're going to do db. I apologize. Let me try to make it as large as I can. So we're going to do db for database dot, and then we're going to name our collection at this point. So we're going to do desserts dot insert many. So we're going to use the insert many command because we're about to insert that entire set of documents, basically, of desserts that we just created. So in this inserts many command, to start the command, we have to do an opening parentheses. And then because we're inserting multiple documents, we want to insert them in an array. So we have to do an opening parentheses and then an opening bracket. Because inside this array, inside the brackets, we're going to paste all of our desserts. So after you have this, go ahead and press Control V or Command V, and it should have pasted all of the desserts that we just worked on. Oops. All 5 of them. And so now we have to close out this command. So first we have to close that array. So do a closing bracket. That means we're done with our group of documents. We're done with our group of desserts. And we want to signify that that's it. There's no other documents that you should be expecting. And then we're going to do a closing parentheses to close out the command. That means everything that we're passing into the command is in between these parentheses. And lastly, we're going to do a semicolon. That's like the final, this is it. That's everything that we want to do with this command. And then just press enter. And you should see your database state update with all of the desserts that we just added. So this feature right here is why I wanted to use this. I know it's a little wonky. I would change it. I'm actually thinking of making my own version of this that works a lot better. But I think it's very valuable to see that after we run this command, you'll see something like this, right? So you'll get an object back that tells you some information about what just happened with the command that you just ran. So here it's saying okay, meaning it was successful, and you have a couple of other pieces of information about the command you just ran. So like this is the number that you just inserted, uptime. This is dealing with some metrics of the database on how fast it was able to insert it. And then it gives you almost like a summary, like a confirmation of what you just added. So after running this, you should now see all of your desserts. Anybody have any questions? Anyone not get to this point? Anyone run into issues? Yes, what kind of error do you have, Nirjana? Ooh, unexpected string. Okay, so you'll want to make sure that anything that is a string like this, any text, has these quotes around it, including the keys. And especially in here, that happened to me when I was testing this last night. Make sure every single one of your ingredients that you add is within these quotes. And you'll also want to try to copy the quotes from my first dessert, because depending on what you are using, if you type in, well, in the editor, it's going to use the right ones. But when I was testing this the other day, like let's say in, I think it was in Notepad. No, it's the same one. Never mind. You might be having a different kind of quotes, not these straight quotes, but they're more for the ones used in editing, like an actual book. Should I have the same DB name? It would be helpful just so we can keep aligned with what everybody is doing. But you don't have to know. But as I walk you through, I will be expecting the same dessert's name. So just double check that everything looks kind of similar. When it says unexpected string, it's either something like a quote is missing, or yeah, usually some unexpected, you're not closing the text properly. So it's going into the next piece of code and it's thinking that it's not a full string. Yes, you can try to add that too. Try to add maybe just 2. So instead of doing all 5, try to do the first 2 like this. And then run the same command here. Do db dot desserts, which it doesn't have to be desserts, but I'm going to continue on with desserts, dot insert many, and then opening parentheses, opening bracket, and then just paste the 2 objects, and then close it out with a closing parentheses, closing bracket, closing parentheses, and then a semicolon, and see if you still get the same error. Thank you, everybody, for holding on here. Let us know if you get the same error. Because if not, then there might be something in the last 3 objects you have that has an improperly quoted string. Woo, good job. All right, so now yours might be a little different moving forward. So if the 2 worked, then you should see 2 objects up here in your database state. Sweet. So now we have our information here, right? And now let's say we need to add another one. Let's say we forgot. What do you think the actual command is going to look like? Any guesses? You can put it in the chat. If you know, go ahead and add it into here. But I want to give you some time to think. Yes, that is correct, Sarah. Insert 1. So to insert one more, let's say I forgot. Let's say now I actually, what is the one dessert that somebody posted here that I also agreed with? I think it was yours, Sarah. It was coulant, right? It was, yes, it was this one. So I'm like, oh, how did I forget about this dessert? I want to add that. So to add another one, you would do the same thing. You would say DB, because we want to insert into that particular database. We're going to do desserts because that's the same collection we want to insert that data into. And then this time we're going to do insert 1, just like Sarah said. Now, the difference with this one is because we're only inserting 1 document, we're only going to start the command with an opening parentheses, and then we're going to only insert 1 object. So I'm actually going to, I like working in here better and then pasting it in there just because it has this, and also because I can do this, right? So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste to make the new one here. And I'm going to do coulant and source. Give me a name here. Where do you usually get it from, Sarah? What is the name of where you get it? Or is it homemade? Any restaurant? Let's just say I fulfilled my dream of being a pastry chef and I made it myself. So I'm going to say homemade. And let's say I only found out about it, so I only had 1. And here we're going to do, let's just say there's some ice cream because I like ice cream. We're going to do fudge because that's in the center, right? Need cocoa for the actual thing, and that's good. That should tell me enough about what's in here. So now I have my other dessert that I want to add. So I'm going to copy this object. And now we're going to go back here and I'm going to insert 1, just 1. So you'll see I don't need the opening bracket anymore because we're not inserting multiple documents, we're only inserting 1. And in this case, I want to just directly insert that object. And then don't forget to close the command out. So put a closing parentheses and then punctuate that with a semicolon because we're telling it that's it. That's all we want for this particular command. When we press enter, it should add it now to the desserts. You'll see here, we've added the coulant. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, coulant. And all of the information we just added is in there. consumed, ingredients, they're all there, and they're now all part of the desserts. Awesome. Give you a little more time to add your own dessert, an extra dessert that you may have missed. Maybe you saw one from when we were sharing it and you're like, oh, that one looks good too. And you want to add that one. Or maybe you want to use the insert many command again and insert more than one dessert. If you want to add more, go ahead and do that. So in insert one, we do not use the brackets because the brackets denote an array. And an array, as you see in our ingredients here, arrays usually hold a group of things. So yes, they can hold one item, but for most cases, we use them to hold a group of things. Now, insert one doesn't need that because insert one is only inserting a single document. So in this case, you can omit or remove the brackets because we're not inserting more than one document. We're just inserting one single document. And in that case, we can directly pass the entire document that we want to insert into our database. Yes, sorry. Is the semicolon at the end mandatory? So yes, for most of these editors or applications that you would use it, these are mandatory. They're like the semicolons in JavaScript in the sense that they punctuate the end by saying this is the very end of the command that I want to do. So if you had multiple here, like if we didn't have this and we immediately had this one right after, it wouldn't know where the end of this command was. So this one wouldn't be as bad because these are different pieces of data, but it's just to help it's to help the application, in this case, this shell here, know that this is the end of the command that we want to do. When you get into more complex applications, or even when you're writing it yourself, you usually want to know, like step by step, this is what I'm doing to my database. This is how I'm manipulating the data. So you do need the semicolon to help know when the end of the command, where the end of the command is. And Nurjana, is this part of where you wanted to see or all the way up? It's mostly the same, except for if you're using insert many, you just need to make sure to use a bracket and then paste in the rest of your objects. Cool. Awesome. So now let's say we have all of our desserts in here, right? And let's say we have been blessed and there is a, I don't know, like a pastry party that is happening. And for some reason, all of our favorite desserts are just laid out right in front of us. It just magically appeared. I would love that right now. And so let's say let me show that one. So let's say that this beautiful spread of desserts is now in front of us. And naturally, because these are our favorite desserts, we're probably going to eat one of every single one. Now, after we eat every single one, at least one of each kind of dessert, we probably want to increase the amount that we've eaten, right? The total consumed. And in this case, we want to increase that. Thank you, Sarah. Yes. So yes, insert one if you are still wanting to do that. Just, it looks exactly like this. So you would use the db.desserts insert one, open it, and then just pass in the direct object of what you want to pass in. And don't forget to close it with a closing parentheses and a semicolon. So we have the spread, we have eaten one of each of our favorite desserts, and now we need to update this. We need to say for each of these ones, we need to add one more because we were gluttons and we ate one of each one. So we would use something called the update many command. So we're going to do that right now. We are going to update all of our documents, and we're going to update the specific field to increase by 1. So let's do that. So same thing, we're going to start with DB, and we have the desserts collections. So we have db.desserts, and then we're going to use the update many command. And with most commands, we have to start it off with the opening parentheses. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to update the particular, we want to update all of the total consumed by 1, right? So what we want to do here is, in this case, what would usually happen is we would send first a matching filter. So these are a little different than the insert, because in insert, we have no notion of needing to filter what we're inserting by. This is just brand new data that we're adding into our database. But in the case of update many, we're now changing something that's already existing. And to make sure that we are changing what we want to change, we're updating what we want to update, we want to add a sort of matching criteria first. We want to say, make sure to change only this particular thing. So in this case, this is very rare, because right now we just want to update everything, right? So for this particular case, we don't want to have a matching criteria. But just as an example, let's say we needed to change just honey toast, right? This is just an example. You don't have to follow me here. But if I only had one extra piece of honey toast and I only wanted to update just that record, I would say, I would not use update many, first of all. I would say update 1. And then I would need to pass a criteria, right? I don't want to update all of them. I only want to update honey toast. So we need to add a matching filter that says, look for the name honey toast, right? So that's our matching filter. This is going to say, go to our database and go to our desserts collection and look for any documents that match the name honey toast. That's where we are so far. So that's the matching filter. We add a comma because then the next object we pass is what we actually want to update it with. It would be set. So set is saying basically, this is what I want you to update. And in this case, it would be total consumed equals, well, so that is wrong, right? So this here, we would say 1. And what this would actually do was not what I intended. What this would do is just overwrite the total consumed to 1. That's not what we want. We want to add 1 to the total consumed, right? But here I'm just mostly showing this because in the next actual command we're going to use, we're not using the matching filter. But if we were only needing to match a particular document based on some condition, then we would pass in a first object here. And then this would be the condition you want to meet. So in this case, my condition was I only wanted to match against my dessert that was named honey toast. You could even change this to be like anything that I ate more than 20 of. So then you would change this condition to be total consumed is greater than 20 or something like that. But that's just what if we wanted to update 1. So now you can start following along. So we have update many, right? Because the original thing I asked was we want to update all of the total consumed by 1, because we have this beautiful display of desserts and we were able to eat 1 of each one. So we're going to do update many. And then again, we're not going to pass a matching filter because we want to update all of the documents. This is something that is intentional. Usually you don't want to update every single document in your collection, but that. Copy this command into the chat. Yes, so it will be update many. I will copy it fully once I am finished with it. So you'll do update many. And then because we want to increment or add to our total consumed, we actually have a special operator for that. And it's called $inc for increment. So operators are special syntax in the Mongo query language. I'm going to send you now to that documentation. And this is, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's way more operators that we can use, but the one we're going to be using is the increment one. So in order to increment or add to our total consumed, we're going to use that operator. We're going to say, we want to increment. So we want to use the increment operator. And then what are we going to increment? Well, we want to increment the total consumed field, right? We want to add 1 to every single document's count. So we want to do total consumed. And by how much do we want to increment it? Well, I was pretty full after eating 1 of each, so I was only able to eat 1 of each. So that's what we do. We have 1 of each. So it's kind of a switch on the syntax, but that's because we're taking advantage of the operators that the Mongo query language has, and we're going to increment or add 1 to the total consumed field for all of our documents. So after that's done, make sure you close the object. So this is the closing tag for this. And then we want to finally close out the command and then do a single semicolon. And then if we press enter, oh, awkward, cannot convert undefined or null to object. Let's see, maybe we do need to pass one. Let's check it out. So you do need to pass that in. I think I was thinking of the update command, which does not need that. So go ahead and get this command here. And I'll paste it in the chat in case it's too hard to read. And you'll see that these have all been incremented by 1. You'll see even here the collant that we just added. Remember, I only said we had 1 because it was new, and now it's up to 2. And when you press enter on those, you should see all of your own desserts go up by 1. And if you don't, please let me know. And so again, just to reiterate, the entire explanation I went to earlier, you could just forget. So we do need to put in a filter here. In just this case, we don't pass anything in because we want to update all of them. So if we did want to update only a specific one, we would pass in some sort of matching condition. So we use the update many command. We don't pass a matching condition or filter because we want to update all of our documents. And then here we are telling our database and our collection what exactly to update. And in here, we are using the increment operator, which adds to a field that you say. So because we wanted to add 1 to all of the documents total consumed field, we use that specific operator. And you'll notice in the link that I sent you to our documentation, we have many, many other operators that do a lot of very common functionality. So we can take the average of things. We can sum up things. We can do the max of things, a lot of mathematical operations, a lot of comparison operators. There's a lot of different things. When you work with text, you can use specific operators to match certain text fields. If you're searching within arrays, you can search for either a whole array that matches something. So let's say you wanted to search for something that has exactly all of these three, you have an operator for that. I'm not able to run the update many command here. Nothing to do. This doesn't let me paste the command. Yes, try refreshing the page. Thank you, Carolina. I apologize. So yeah, this thing is kind of wonky. It does what it needs to do, but it's certainly not my first choice, but it was what I had to resort to. And hopefully the next time I see you, I have hopefully created my own that works a little bit better. Just want to double check that everyone got through there. So give me a thumbs up or an okay in the chat if you were able to successfully add one into your total consumed. Awesome. Wonderful. All right. So now we're going to do a little bit of cleaning on our collection here, because after seeing how many honey toasts that I've eaten, I'm kind of ashamed of myself. Like 53, like if somebody read that, I'd be like, so let's say we want to forget about that. We want to say, nope, this never happened. What are you talking about? I've never even heard of honey toast. And so we're going to actually delete that record, just take it out of there. Awesome. I'm glad that worked. Okay. So, and thank you, Carolina, for helping as well. So now we want to delete this particular record here, right? And so we can do this in a number of different ways. So looking at our data here, to me, the most logical thing to make sure I don't accidentally delete the wrong one is to delete it by the name. To me, that's the most unique, and that's the easiest way for me to know that, yes, I want to delete honey toast. But you can also choose to delete by the source. So let's say, can you delete by ID number? You can, but it's not recommended. And I think in this particular terminal, it doesn't allow you to. I'm not sure why it's implemented that way. So we're going to try it with different fields. So in this case, you can choose any one, right? The most important thing to remember here, especially when you're deleting data, is you want to make sure you're deleting what you want to delete. So when we pass in the matching filter, you want to make sure it's as explicit as possible, and it doesn't carry any risk of accidentally matching some other documents. You want it to be as unique as possible and just really get to the point of really pinpoint the document you want to do. So for this case, I will use the name because, of course, this is a very small subset of data, but I can see very clearly that is the one that I want to delete. It's the one that has the most too, so I want to take that out. And we're just going to delete that because I don't want anyone to know that I ate 53 honey toasts so far. So same pattern, which is what I love about the Mongo query language. So we're going to do db.desserts because that's the collection that we want to manipulate the data with. This is where we want the command to be run against. And now this case, I want to delete one, right? We want to delete only one single document. We don't want to delete all of it. If you wanted to, we can do that at the end, which is our last one. But we'll use the delete many if you wanted to do that. And we're going to do that at the end. So if you want to wait. So delete one, same thing, open the command with the open parentheses. And now very important, the matching criteria, right? So I like to just start it out so I know that I have the closing brace. And in here, we want to put the matching status or the matching thing that we want to delete here. So what do we want to do? In this case, I want to delete my record or delete my document that has the name honey toast. So we'll add that in. So we're going to do name, oops, and honey toast. And now keep in mind that this is going to look for an exact match of the name. So casing matters, spacing matters, and we want that because, again, we want to be explicit that this is the one we want to delete. And so we'll close out the command. Make sure to add the semicolon because we need to let that know that we're done with this command. We're not expecting any more information here. And if we press enter, bye-bye. What 53 honey toasts? I didn't eat 53 honey toasts. If you look at my desserts collection, these are the only desserts that I ate. So similarly to yours, you should see that yours was deleted. You shouldn't see whatever dessert that you chose to delete, and you don't have to remember that you ate that dessert. So give me a thumbs up if you're able to get through that, or an okay in the chat if you're able to get through that as well. Awesome. I know, but I deleted my first and favorite one, but it's because I ate too many. In all seriousness, I'm not ashamed. I do love my desserts, but for the sake of this tutorial, we don't need to put that in record, right? We don't need to make that permanent and say that, yeah, there is this permanent record here that says Adrienne ate 53 honey toasts. What if you wanted to add a category to all, for example, contains wheat? So yes, so you could do that. Let's see how you would update many. You would use something like an update many. And I believe you could, I think you can use update or insert. So let me double check. Update. And yeah. I just want to make sure the syntax is correct that I'm about to show you, as well as that it is supported in this particular terminal. So update. Yes, okay. So we can use the update command. Now I'm going to try it. I'm not sure if it will work in this particular implementation of the application, but we will see. So the syntax would be, so DB desserts, because again, this is the collection we want to do this against. And then we want to use update. Now in this update command, again, we need the matching filter, right? What do we want to update? And in this case, because we want to add this new field, this new category to all of them, we want to, oh, okay. Oh, no, it is a new category. So I was getting confused. I thought you meant to add contains wheat in the ingredients array, which is not what you're asking. So we want to add a brand new field to all of these documents. So for this, we're going to pass an empty filter matching object because we want to add this to all documents. And then we will use something similar to the update. Oh no, we didn't use it this time. So this time we will use something called a set operator. And then what we're going to set, oops. Okay. So we're going to update all of our documents. And what are we going to update it with? Well, we want to set a new field. So we can say contains wheat. And then we want to, in this case, we want to say, I'm going to assume that they all do for now. So we're going to say, yes, everything right now, as we are adding this new field, does contain wheat. So what this is saying is, again, matching criteria, we want all, so we're not adding any kind of particular condition. And then we're going to use set to add this new field as part of them all. And depending on how this particular thing has been implemented, we'll see if this works. Oh, it did work. So let's see what happened. There we go. So it did add it on here. So should it be update many or just update? So in the documentation that I've sent you, you will see that the actual proper the proper syntax is actually, it is, you're right, just update many. But this particular case, the one whoever wrote this, I think just forgot to add the many. So it is called update here, but you're absolutely correct. It is update many. But you'll see it did work. So it added the contain suite field, a brand new field to every single document with, for now, the saying it did add it all. Oh, I don't see it on the other ones. Let's see what happened here. So it did only add it to one. So you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Let's try that again. So the cool thing about this in the terminal is that if you press the up button, it should save your, and that's very common among most terminals. When you use the up arrow, you will have your old commands saved there. So let's try that. And I apologize. When I was working with this yesterday, I think I was probably on this version, but it did not let me use update menu before, but I should have known because we did use it right here, right? So thanks for pointing that out. So now if we try this, we should see what we actually wanted to do, which is update all of them. So there we go. So that's what we wanted, right? So now all of the documents have this contain suite, and contain suite. So that is one way to add that new one. And if you are confident that it is going to be all the same answer, then you can add, you can use this method to kind of update all of your documents. But for something like this, I mean, not all of them may have wheat, maybe some are not. So you would want to update that either in the database directly, like in the portal, or you just want to reinsert that with the correct values of whether or not it contains wheat. Yes, I will do that. So yes, you can. You can add a new field and add it to all of them. And the command that I just pasted is what allows you to do that. So if you want to add a different field, you can just change the contains _ wheat to whatever field you would like. All right, we're almost there. Thank you so much for staying with me. The last thing we're going to do now is with all this hard work, we'll just say, you know what, not just honey toast, we're going to just delete that this all ever even existed. Let's just get rid of all of this evidence, right? And so this one, I think if you've been following along, I think you'll be able to know what the command is. Can anyone tell me in the chat what that command would look like if we just wanted to delete everything? Right, delete many. That's correct. Sarah, if I want to add an ingredient for the last dessert. So if you wanted to add an ingredient for the last dessert, you would update it. And I believe there is a special operator to add to a particular array. Let me double check. well, let's just try it out. So let's say I wanted to update coolant, right? So let's do db.desserts. So I'm trying to do update when it's to foot last record. Yes. So db.desserts update 1. And then we need a filter. So let's say I want to update coolant. And that's my matching filter, right? So we only want to update this one. And then what do I want to do? So let's say, I think there's one specific for ingredients. So we want to add an ingredient to the last dessert, right? So we want to, oh yes, I think it is the push array. Well, let's just try it. We'll figure it out on the fly. So there's another operator called push, and that is similar to the push in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, when you want to add an item to an array, you would use the push function. And in Mongo query language, we have created an operator that's of the same name. So I'm going to see if that works. Off the top of my head, I believe that's what it's going to do. So we want to push into the ingredients array, ingredients, and we want to add, what else is in? Let's just say whipped cream. Right. So let's close that. Can't update 1. Okay, let me double check my operators. So just so you know, like these are not all off the top of my head. I reference the documentation all the time. So let me double check that that is the right way to do it. Let me see, update. I think it's push update. Maybe Acosta, let me see. Here we go. So the operator is right. So let's push. Unless it doesn't have it. Let's see. Push ingredients. No, so it should work. So just so show you what I am researching. So this is appending a value to an array, right? So there's a matching filter, which is in this case an ID, and we are using it correctly. Let's try to use it with update. I don't know why that would. Let's try it. So let's try it with update. And then we just want to paste in here just to double check I did it right? So it is push. And then we have what we're pushing into an object. So that. And then the name of the array, which is ingredients. And then what we actually want to add, which is whipped cream. Looks right to me. Let's try it with the update, the way the documentation has it. Okay, so it is that way. So now if we look at this ingredients list, you'll see it did update it with whipped cream. Sweet. And so now for the final finale, we want to get rid of all of these desserts. And you are all right who answered delete many. So to get rid of all of the evidence, let's just desserts.delete many. And then what do you think goes inside the command? Paste in the chat what you think should go in the command. If we want to just get rid of everything, delete everything. That's right, Sarah. So are you ready to say goodbye to our desserts? Wave them off. Goodbye, affogato. Goodbye, chocolate chip cookies and malted crunch ice cream. Tiramisu and coulant. Goodbye. Give it a moment. Done. Goodbye. No more desserts. This was all just a figment of your imagination. We didn't actually eat all of those desserts. And we've just deleted it. Now, you'd probably never want to do that in a real production database, but it's important to know how to do that in case you need to. Sometimes make a mistake. You may have inserted the wrong data and you're like, oh no, this is all wrong. Or maybe you have the wrong subset of data and you just need to clear that out. This is a valid use case for that. Maybe you need to clear your database and start from scratch whenever you do something. Like this particular application, I'm sure it does that every time we reload the page or whenever you explicitly reset it. And as more people start using it, it needs to make sure it doesn't keep the state of whoever the last person was that worked on it, assuming that this is a single database that's supporting it. So in that case, that's also valid. You want to delete it. But in most cases, in most applications, you probably don't want to delete all of your application's data, but it's important to know how to do. And that's that. So if you want, you can continue using this. I think it's a very helpful way to see what is happening as you're doing the commands. I'm going to add another link to all of the operators here. So let me just add this here. So there's so much more you can do here. There's a lot of operators. Our documentation is really great about showing you, and a lot of the code snippets that we have in the link that I just pasted shows you exactly how to write what it is you may be wanting to do. So feel free to check that out. And, I like to have this open right on the side and then have the documentation open on the right here. This one kind of doesn't lend itself, but if I zoom out a little, it should look a little better. I've only zoomed it in, so it's easier for everyone who's watching to see. But I like to keep this here and then kind of look through the different operators and just play around with it, see what is going on, and really understand as you type those commands in what is happening. So I waited till the end to do this because, again, it's another quirk of this particular site. But you can click on this question mark here. So just keep in mind, these are the only commands that they have implemented. So if you do see something here that is not here, just keep in mind you might get an error that it's not working. And it's only because this particular site does not have it implemented. Doesn't mean it won't work anywhere else. And then this is the kind of weird part. See, I can't click out of here or anything. So when this, it kind of freezes. So when that happens, I just refresh. And luckily, if I still had my data here, it would still exist here. So if that ever happens to you, just refresh and it should still keep your database state. And if you want to completely get rid of your database state, you can press this button, which is reset. So then that actually fully clears out your entire database state and you can start from scratch if you ever need to use that. So that is that. So I'm going to finish up here very quickly. So thank you so much. Thank you for staying with me. That was a very long workshop, but I hope you found some use into it. And yes, Zuha, I'm working with CodeUp. I actually wanted to make this a much longer workshop, but I think it was good to kind of split it into these two levels. So I would love to come back and I would like to do another one that has a little bit more advanced topics on what we're doing. Thank you. Thank you so much for staying with me. And then before you go, I just want to let you all know that we are actually streaming on Twitch. So it's not just for games. We actually show how we code different kinds of things. This is my colleague, Nick. That's me right here. And every Friday, I say around 9 a.m. Sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, depending on who is streaming. If you go here and follow us, We stream about many different topics, including how to use MQL, how to make it faster. We talk to a lot of different people in the community about how they're using MongoDB. And then since you all are here, I would love to show and tell you that we're starting a new series. So you're actually the first ones to know about this, and I can do this because I'm talking to you. But my colleagues and I, we are starting a new Twitch series. So every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we will be going through a process of learning how to create a game in Unity and with MongoDB. So I have never done game development in my life. So I think this would be super cool. I think for anyone who's interested to see what that thought process is like, we're going to show all of our, pain points, all of the things that we don't know. We'll show you what we're researching, and then we'll show you how we integrate all of these parts together with MongoDB to build a game. So I'm very excited, and I hope you will follow us to see when it is that we are streaming. But definitely every Wednesday, starting next week, we will be streaming this. So if you want to just have us on the background, it'd be great. We would love for you to be there because we like interacting with the chat as well. So if you have questions, even if you have suggestions, we just love talking to you while we're streaming this and discussing these kinds of projects. And if you can't make it at this time, don't worry. We will have the videos available on Twitch, but we also upload them to YouTube eventually. So if you can't make it at this time, you will be able to watch it at a later time, and I will definitely share it with you all. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for staying with me. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, we want to do a more advanced tutorial soon, and so I'll hand it back to Ruth. Maybe we can talk about that.
Thank you very much, Adrienne, for that very, very detailed tutorial. And thank you, everybody, for sticking around. I know it was quite a long time, but it was very, very, I hope it was very useful for you. Yeah, just like Adrienne was saying, we do plan to do a future session if Adrienne definitely wants to join us again and is happy to join us again. And so just, keep in touch with our Eventbrite page or with the Code Up on social media, and we'll let you know when the next one is. But it's likely to be kind of in the next few months. So definitely keep in touch with us. If you do want to come to another workshop, we really, really would appreciate your feedback. And so I'm just going to drop a little survey here into the chat. And I would really, really appreciate it if you could just fill it out and let us know how we can improve as well for future workshops.
Yes, I would love to hear your feedback as well. I'm looking forward to that because if there's anything I can improve on it, I'd love to know. So please take some time to fill that out as well. And
Thank you very much, Adrienne.
Thank you. I think the last thing I'll add here is if you have any other questions, if something didn't make sense or you wanted to talk a little bit more, I'm going to paste my Twitter here, or let me get a clickable link for you. Twitter. So if you follow me on here, I will let you know about when I'm streaming, about what we're doing, about any other things that I may be participating in, as well as the next Code Up workshop that I do. And again, if you have any questions, just message me on Twitter. Just give me a heads up like, hey, I was from the Code Up workshop, so I know who you are. But yeah, I'm super happy to answer anything that may have not made sense, or if I went a little too fast somewhere, I would be happy to spend some time with you there.
Thanks very much for that. I'm sure you'll get a lot of people sending you messages as well.
Hopefully, I'm here for them.
I've also just popped in my email address there. If you've got any questions about Code Up, about our courses, about any workshops that are coming up, about our community, just feel free to reach out to me over email. I think that's a wrap then. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening or day or morning, and hopefully see you at the next workshop that we hold with Adrienne. Thank you very much, Adrienne, as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.